Let me do a little check-in with the latest audiobook I'm reading, which is The Voyage of the Ballast. Oh man, can I even get the word out? Ballast. Ballast? Oh. Number 3 in the Memoirs of Lady Trent by Mary Brennan. It's a 2016 book, the third in the series. I've read the first two, the Natural History of Dragons, and whatever the second one is called. Number 2. In this one, it's set in sort of an alternate fantasy world, and fantasy world of 19th century, and she is from Scareland, which I guess is Scotland. Could be kind of the UK in general. She is a natural anthropologist, uh, a naturalist who is studying dragons, because that's the fantasy element. Dragons exist in this world, and of course, to do this, there aren't actual dragons in Scareland. She has to do general voyages to different parts of the world in this one. And now the thing with dragons is they have bones, which it turns out are incredibly lightweight and incredibly strong if you can preserve them, and they actually figured out how to preserve them. But the thing with this is if this secret gets out, which it has gotten out, suddenly everyone will want to slaughter all the dragons to get their bones, because that would be super, super valuable as a resource. They're desperately trying to figure out a way to synthesize that, but have not so far. She is continuing her studies in dragons and has determined that her next thing to do is do a 2-year voyage on the Ballast, a small little, well, relatively large, but 40 or 50 men thing, which she's doing with also a shipping company, and she's also doing a bunch of different things. She's writing articles for a newspaper back home. She's doing a couple of studies for other things. So she, her female assistant, her male kind of lower class colleague, um, are all good. She's a widow, and her young son Jake are embarking on this voyage. And this is kind of cool because Jake had been getting left behind in the earlier ones, but in this one, he gets to come along, and he really takes to shipboard life. And it turns out that maybe he's not going to become a naturalist like his mother, but it sounds like he might actually become some sort of sailor in the end, just from the early bits of this novel, which is kind of cool because he's learning stuff and he loves to swim. I love to swim, so that's good. There's also the general kind of politics, the colonial politics of the regions. Trying to get their, having to bribe the right officials, um, meeting other kind of fellow scientists, doing studies and studying creatures. And at one point, as they're sailing in the ship, a giant kind of sea serpent, maybe dragon, comes up and tries to crush the ship, and they kill it, and they study it, which is kind of fascinating. So it's very much, the audiobook is read by Kate Redding, who is a total pro at this. Has written so much stuff. Has done a lot of Brandon Sanderson's works, most notably his Stormlight archives, doing the female part in that. And she's got the right kind of clipped, very precise, slightly fussy Victorian lady uh, um, cadences for this, in a kind of a semi-American sort of way. Mary Brennan is an American author, so it is a little bit of it's imagined Victorian diction, but done through an American sensibility. I think the thing that takes the curse off with a lot of stuff like this is that it's a fantasy world. So even though I know there were lady scientists and kind of adventurers and travelers in actual historical Victorian England, having it in a fantasy world gives it a little bit of a kind of a wiggle room, and she can kind of do stuff. She doesn't have to be precisely nailed down to stuff. Uh, you know, She gets to wear trousers because she's away from society. There's, however, lots of scurrilous rumors going around that she must be hooking up with all the dudes because she's unescorted on this trip. In past ones, she was much more escorted. So she's apparently building up lots of scandal at home, maybe writing in her articles a little too enthusiastically about other of her fellow scientists who are all male, of course. So yeah, I'm really enjoying that. This is kind of a fun, fun listen to in this one. So we will continue with that, and I'll try and remember more names other than Lady Trent. Sophia, which is her name of her, I think the name of her companion. Jake. Tom, I think, is the lower class guy who so far has had a lot less time in this one than he has in the past because they kind of clashed in earlier books. In this one, I think their relationship is a little bit more planed out, so we don't actually hear as much about him. Yeah. So I'll stop with there.